and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. On the eve of Budget 2024, we discuss what are the top 15 expectations from the Government of India, from our Finance Ministry, that is going to set the ball rolling for year 2024. Let's quickly take a look at some of these budget expectations, and top of the mind come the fuel prices, petrol and diesel. Let's start with that. And Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya, this is a budget that is going to be announced right ahead of the election. It is a vote on account, and therefore the likelihood of the government then coming up with these reductions and cesses to appease the voters, to appease the citizens. Now, top of the mind for, the middle class, and they talk about every single time there needs to be reduction in taxes, there need to be reduction in the slabs. This was reflected in the budget that was announced last year as well. But can there be a repeat of that happening? What is the expectation? What is the probability of that happening this year as well?
So, if we are expecting a populist budget, unfortunately, if you go by what happened in 2019, which is also an election year, and where also we had a vote on account instead of a full budget, there weren't too many populist measures. So if the expectation is that there will be a lot of populist measures, I think that will not happen tomorrow. But in terms of the personal taxation, I think there's a glide path towards simplification of the taxation, but not really reduction in taxation. So what has happened with the new tax regime also that has progressively come in since the last two budgets is that it has simplified our life. But are we paying lesser taxes is a bit of a question mark. It's a marginal up and down. For some people, it's a little up, so they reverted back to the old tax system. And for some people, it was a little better to go for the new tax system, and therefore they've gone for that. Will there be an overall reduction? I'm not entirely sure, because what the government seems to be gearing up for is a larger spend in the coming years. Specifically, if you look at infrastructure, we are moving from an EPC to a PPP, but still there are a lot of large projects, new projects that are coming in for which the government needs funding. And the only way to raise funds, only significant way to raise funds is at the end of the day, taxation. So unfortunately, we are all part of the middle class, at least I am, and we desperately do want a reduction in the tax rates. But I'm not entirely sure whether that will happen tomorrow. Also, I think from an indirect tax perspective, with the multitude of rates that are there, if you can reduce the number of tax slabs, there is 0%, 5%, 12%, 18%, 24%, then the whole purpose of GST still is a little diluted. So if you can reduce the number of tax slabs in GST to a lesser number of tax slabs, I think that would be a better situation to be in if that happens tomorrow.
Okay. Okay, all right. Also, what is your overall prediction of the budget? You spoke about tax slabs, we talk about petrol price, fuel prices reduction, we talk about, reduction in gold prices, we talk about electricity. Now, these are the matters that concern the Aam Aadmi, the Janata, the middle class, and that's going to be the focus area. And they're not going to be, we are not going to be talking about, there has been this much amount of money that has been allocated for infrastructure, for building of roads on highways and trains and so on and so forth. What is going to directly impact the consumer, the citizen of our country, if there are announcements that are made, and what are those announcements that the people are waiting for?
So again, I think from the people's perspective, it's pretty much the same every year. And everything that you mentioned, that the fuel prices should go down. People are still reeling under inflation, albeit much lower than what people in other countries are facing. But it's still inflation which is hitting senior citizens. It's hitting those who are on the marginal part of society. So any reduction in fuel prices will obviously also lead to reduction in food prices. And that's something that people are looking forward to. We have been moving away from the subsidy regime So subsidies on fertilizers, if we don't bring it back, then that will also impact the food prices. So I think probably the government might go back to increasing subsidy on fertilizer. So the target will be to ensure that the food prices stay under control. So perhaps a fuel price cut may be in order. Increased subsidy on agriculture may come in. That's also needed by by the economy, because demand comes from that segment. Their consumption at the at the bottom of the pyramid is what really leads to demand. So if you can get some more money back into their pocket, that'll be quite helpful for the economy.
Okay, fair enough. Abhijit Sinha also on the telecast with me. He's the director of ease of doing business. And Abhijit, quickly, same response from you. Now, what do we expect out of the budget? Is this going to be a populist budget? How should we be looking at it, keeping in mind it's an election year?
Thank you and namaskar to everybody on NewsX audience. Mega, I think the way we look at budget have not changed over last 10 years, then we should now start re-looking at it from different perspective. Populist budget and the budget of freebies, where we used to give a lot of last moment announcement, used to be an culture before 2014. Now this culture of post 2014, when Gujarat model was brought as a benchmark of somebody who has done development, and people picked him up to become his prime minister and then go ahead. 2019 election was most of about accountability and transparency and the reforms which government wanted to do. And in 2024, when we are talking about in 2024, just before election, we are also having budget. And here we are talking about the decade of India and also the decade of India. The budget is going to be not only for 2024, it is also going to talk about Amrit Kal. And when you are talking about Amrit Kal, necessarily you are making a reference of 2047. So plans between 2022 to 2047, where we have already spent 2 years out of 25 years, is not only a budget of, okay, last moment I have to woo my voters, so I have to thank them. It is about bringing an per capita income of each and every individual of this country from.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you, sir. I have with me right now, we have Jaikar Singh. He's the director of Symphony Resorts, Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Good to have you, Jaikar, on the telecast with us. And what's your budget expectation? Are there going to be certain subsidies or certain discounts that are going to be, incentives that are going to be provided to the hospitality, to the tourism sector?
Hi, good evening. So definitely 2024 is sure to be a pivotal year for tourism industry in India. And definitely I'm hopeful for a forward-looking strategy where we see that the budget allocation doubles every year for the next 5 years. That is where we will see maximum of capacity building for the islands. While hailing from a remote island like Andaman's here, we already see from the last year's budget allocation, we have benefited by leaps and bounds by seeing development in terms of our inter-island terminals, logistics all over the islands. So there has been a lot of influence with the last year's progression, and we definitely look forward for this year. So also recently we had the inauguration of our new airport under the leadership of PM Modi, which has enhanced and really expanded the capacity of the islands here. But also what we look forward are certain helps and measures by the government that will help us, having international connectivity and increase our capacity to get further international attention now that, India is competing, Andaman in particular is competing with a lot of international island destinations.
Right. Also, today when the president made that speech, initiated the budget session, she also spoke about tourism within our country, and could this be an indication that there is going to be further push that is going to be done by the government of India to expand our tourism footprint?
So as we speak, literally a few days back, there was a delegation of Andaman and Nicobar Island Administration led by our Chief Secretary, Mr. Keshav Chandra, and Secretary to Tourism, Mr. Vishwendra. So it was a delegation which had gone to Thailand to discuss the possibility of developing international connections between Thailand, which would open up our route to Southeast Asia. Because for Andamans and a place like Phuket, we are just a 45-minute flight. Into Bangkok, we are like an hour and under. So definitely there have been proactive measures that are being taken to develop the further connectivity for our island.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I have with me Dikshu Kukureja. Dikshu, I'm asking this question to everybody, but the budget expectation, what is it that can be expected? Is this going to be, in all likelihood, a populist budget? And who is it that the government of India is going to appease through this budget?
Now, well, that would be looking into the crystal ball to see who the government is going to appease. But I think I would say it's a very obvious expectation that being election year and elections a few weeks away, literally, it would be populist, which I don't think in a democracy is anything wrong with it, as long as it's populist and balanced. It cannot be something where, they are short-term measures. But frankly speaking, one has not seen that in this government, that there are measures announced in the budget which are just sops and, you don't know how to fill the coffers again. So I am expecting it to be a sensible, strong budget as we've had in the preceding years. But being from a sector where we are dealing with infrastructure and real estate, because I'm an architect and planner, I think it's very important that the path of progress in the country with the transformations that are taking place in our cities, we still have a long way to go. And therefore, I would say that the significance in the budget that it needs to attach to cities, city planning, and the infrastructure growth is very important. But I would also say that time has come that we start paying equal significance to the environment. Because time and again, we read that infrastructure development is happening, but it's happening at the cost of environment. Now, that I think is a process which is irreversible. And therefore, I would just add that word of caution that wherever tax sops need to be brought in, wherever fiscal incentivization has to take place, all of that needs to happen hand in hand with the infrastructure policies. Okay. Because leaving the environment aside is something we cannot come back and fix later.
There are other important aspects. We talk about inflation and joblessness. There is an expectancy that moves are also going to be made by the government of India to curtail these problems that are engulfing the country and particularly certain sections of our society. How do we look forward to the government taking these actions, and what are these specifics that can be taken? And speaking particularly, Dikshu, about the real estate sector, there has been a lull that the real estate sector has seen in the past several years now, since COVID particularly. Can there be an impetus plan that can be announced by the government this year around? What is the possibility of that happening?
I think one of the, first I'll talk about the real estate sector itself. And I think one of the long pending demands that has been coming from that sector, and for years we are hearing, is about the need to accord it the industry status. So I think that in itself is going to be a big, create a big shakeup and a forward movement in our infrastructure growth if and when that is to happen. Whether it will happen in this particular budget, I don't know, but I certainly think time has come for something like that to take place rather quickly. So that is one important aspect. But I also feel that if we really need to grow, when you talk about joblessness and the demographic dividends that we keep talking about that our country possesses right now, I think it's very, very important to see that how can we place ourselves truly as a manufacturing global hub. And that aspect is something I saw in the press today, comments by the US ambassador saying that, there's a lot of talk here about Make in India, but really a lot of production and businesses are actually from across the world going to Southeast Asian countries. So how factual that is something the economists and policymakers can look into. But the fact of the matter is that we still have a huge potential for developing India as a manufacturing hub. And, the winds of change are there. and I think everything's pointing in the right direction as far as India to assume that role. But that is something I think the budget needs to announce in specific policies. We actually tried out SEZs, but that was not a great success. PPP models have not been that great a success. So I think there needs to be more innovation in terms of how to engage the private enterprise. Unless the private sector is really, truly brought forward, things are just going to be more on paper than in reality.
Advocate Khushbu Jain, there is also a strong China factor that has been reflective in the past budget announcements. Keeping in mind there are certain subsidies that are provided, incentives that are provided to the domestic manufacturers, service providers, in a bid to cut down on the Chinese imports that come into the country. Can this trend also be visible in the 2024 budget?
Absolutely, because if you'll see the way, I'll link this to the security aspect, that national security is something which is paramount. And we have seen not just the other things which were coming from China, but the kind of products, the digital products, the IoT devices that were coming from China is in a way threat to Indian economy, is in a way, can in a way lead to an aspect where our critical infrastructure can be at a security threat. That's where we have put a stop, that specifically on the aspect whereas IoT devices, whereas web cameras, drone, these were the things which were coming, the hardwares which were coming from China should have a stop, apart from other countries, so that to put a security circle to our own, or ring to our own country. So you would see something like that happening in 2024 as well. And it's not just happening in India, it's happening across globe. All countries, including US, have been alarmed when you talk about products coming from China, especially digital products coming from China. So 2024, yes, we will see that, because there has been an aspect of strengthening our cybersecurity and to reach towards the global leadership. And one side we say that we are coming as one of the fifth largest economy, where we are coming into, we want to strengthen our global standing. That's where I think it has to be make in India products, so that we are secure and strengthened completely.
Right, absolutely. In fact, there have been action plans that have been initiated that have had direct impact on how our domestic players are given an advantage of, whether it is about mobile phones, whether it is about silicon import from other countries, whether it is about building collaborations between foreign countries with direct investment, with FIIs that are pouring into the country. And those have been on a periodic, systematic way divested from as well, and that has created to a larger domestic competitive playground for players within the country versus when we take a look at China and the kind of aggressive policy that we put hold for China. But moving forward, we also have to take a look at a number of yojanas, the schemes that have been announced by the government of India. Now, there have been multi-thousand crore rupees that have been funded in the course of the last, 10 years that the government, 10, 15 years that the government has been, the BJP government has been in power. And is there a probability that more funds are going to be infused into these schemes? And which schemes do you think are going to be targeted? Dr. Bhattacharya, your response.
Yeah, I think one of the dimensions will be that there'll be more AI used for discovering the beneficiaries of these schemes. So that'll be a new dimension that we'll see, if not in this budget, but later in this year. Because what is happening is that these schemes are getting created, but those who are supposed to get it, the intended beneficiaries, do not get it. Having said that, I think the focus of the government is to have more money in lesser number of schemes rather than announcing a large number of schemes. If you look at the total number of schemes, they've actually reduced, but the money allocated to each of the schemes have gone up, so that there is a tangible benefit coming in. In fact, if you add up the total money given to the various schemes and look at the number of people on BPL, one can actually fund a lakh plus per year to each of them, if that entire budget is really available. What is happening is a mismatch between the budgeted amount and what is actually delivered to the intended beneficiaries. So coming back to your question, we expect more money to be given to lesser number of schemes rather than having a large number of schemes, and this will include schemes such as even generation of power in a renewable manner, so solar and green hydrogen and so on and so forth will also be part of these schemes that we expect to see tomorrow. But also do keep in mind that this is not a full-fledged budget. So I really don't see that there'll be too many populist measures that will happen, that freebies will come in and so on. What may happen is support to agriculture, support to vulnerable industries that may come in. Also, there is a large disruption happening in global supply chain. The West is, moving off from China. The result of which is that there's a lot of dumping happening in India. So the Chinese industry, which is not able to sell elsewhere, is dumping in India. So I expect some safeguards to come in tomorrow's budget that will be badly needed for the small and medium industries in India.
Yeah, absolutely. Jaikar Singh, quickly coming. Sorry, before I go to Jaikar, I also Abhijit Sinha. He was not able to complete his comment because of some technical issue. But Abhijit, again, the same question: a populist budget, but how will it impact if a certain segment of India is not catered to? Is there a possibility? You think budget is so important that it could end up turning the tide for the current government come the election?
I would not repeat what I said. I hope you can pick up from there. But from 2014 to 2024, if you look at the capital expenditure, it has grown from 1.5, 1.6 to 3.2% now. And if we are talking about an 8% consistent growth and 8% economic growth for another 10 years or 15 years, then we are talking about 2020, 2035, 2045, 2050, and a decarbonization plan in India up to 2070, which calculates up towards 10 trillion US dollar budget. So how are we going to get it is very simple. It is very, I think government has no doubt about it that the logistics sector, which is consuming 17% of our GDP now, it has to come down at 8 to 9%. And if you release or if you decrease import up to 27 to 30%, oil import and gas import expenditure also has to go down. So overall, this budget is going to be more of the climate friendly, more of about talking about the decade of India, and it is going to ensure that 2100 USD per capita income is definitely at least matched to a 12,000 USD over a period of time. But this budget is not a budget of 1 year. It's a budget of Amrit Kal. I'm again and again saying we should not expect from government to do and short sight and take short decisions if we actually want our country to grow.
Okay, all right. Coming back to you, Dikshu, and as Abhijit said, there's already been a review that has been shared by the Finance Ministry about how India can look forward to an 8% GDP growth in this particular year. Talking about how India can aim to become the third largest economy of the world by 2047. How India can aim to have a 10 trillion US dollar economy tag by 2027. So if all these aspects were to be achieved by the country, which are those key sectors within the economy that will have to be tampered with, that will have to bring about a political push, a reformative push from the government side to excel further?
Good question, and I tend to agree very much with what Abhijit has pointed out. I think what is going to be fundamental here to take it towards those many trillions of economy dollars that we are talking about is the government's push in the budget for alternative fuels and clean energy. I think that is fundamental for the Viksit Bharat that we are talking about. We need to move into the new realm. After all, if a country is becoming Viksit, it needs more, and the energy demand is going to increase. And that energy cannot be now reliant on old fossil fuels, etc. So I think there's going to be a thrust in the budget on that. The second aspect is the urban development. And when I say urban development, it's not just smart city missions and the focus on cities. Certainly that is going to be there. But I think the time has come, and this budget hopefully will address that, is the focus on towns. Because a lot of our population, and if we want to make our cities livable, I keep saying this again and again, we need to see that we control urban migration. For that, the self-reliancy of towns is important, and that means providing fiscal benefits and impetus for development in the towns, be it healthcare, be it education, be it manufacturing, be it jobs, skill. All this needs to be that self-reliant towns. So I think a lot of budget will go into that. And of course, there is also the Sagar Mala. Now, that is a very important, and in the inland waterway system, I think all these aspects will still need the kind of funds, and therefore the yojnas for that are going to address that as well. And the budget is to definitely
Absolutely. Okay, on that note, I'm out of time, but I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast. Our eyes will be firmly on the finance minister tomorrow when she comes up and announces the budget in the parliament.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.